The room was quiet, and the only sound I could hear was the gentle hum of my computer. The screen glowed faintly, casting eerie shadows across my bedroom walls. As I stared at the letter, my hands trembled slightly, the words on the screen seemingly alive, whispering their secrets directly to my soul. The story began innocuously enough. A guardian angel who had always been there, unseen yet felt. But as I delved deeper, the tone shifted. What seemed to be a comforting tale of protection unraveled into something much darker. A tapestry woven with threads of sacrifice, devotion, and haunting memories. I read the letter again, trying to comprehend its weight. Lieutenant Ashley Gilchrist had been a silent witness to my life, a shadow in the corner, a protector from the unseen dangers that lurked. But now, knowing his story, I felt his presence differently. It wasn't just love. It was obsession, bound by a promise so strong that even death could not sever its grip. The room grew colder, as if acknowledging the memories I was stirring. I wrapped a blanket around myself, but the chill wasn't just physical. It was the kind that seeped into your bones, making you aware of things you couldn't explain. I remembered the moments the letter described, instances I'd buried deep in my mind. The toys dancing in the corner, the inexplicable movements of objects, the unshakable feeling of being watched. These were not figments of a child's imagination. They were his doing. Each act, no matter how small, was meant to protect, to reassure, to love. But love, I realized, could also be terrifying. As I sat there, my mind wandered to that night. The night when everything changed. I had screamed for him to leave me alone, throwing books and anything I could find into the dark corner of my room. I thought I was defending myself, fighting back against an unseen terror. Now, I understood it was his heart I was breaking, his devotion I was rejecting. A sudden knock on my bedroom door jolted me back to reality. My mother's voice called out, soft and concerned. "Are you okay, honey?" I hesitated, unsure how to respond. "Yeah, Mom. Just thinking." Her footsteps receded down the hall, leaving me alone once more. I turned back to the screen, rereading the final lines of his letter. The weight of his farewell hit me harder this time. He was gone, and with his departure came an unsettling emptiness in the room, as if his very essence had been keeping something else at bay. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house felt louder. Every shadow seemed to stretch further. The dark corner of my room, once the resting place of my unseen protector, now felt hollow, like an invitation for something else to fill the void. As the hours dragged on, I began to hear faint whispers. Not words, but an unintelligible murmuring that made my skin crawl. I sat up in bed, clutching the blanket tightly. "Ashley," I whispered into the darkness, hoping for some form of reassurance. Silence. The whispers grew louder, closer. They seemed to swirl around me, each one brushing past my ears like a cold breeze. Panic set in as I realized this wasn't him. Whatever this was, it wasn't here to protect me. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness. The corner of the room was empty, but the whispers didn't stop. They grew more insistent, as if mocking my futile attempt to illuminate the unseen. Desperate, I remembered the last line of his letter. "If you call out my name, call me what you used to call me as a kid." What was it? My mind raced, trying to pull the memory from the depths of my childhood. "Lovey," I whispered hesitantly. The name felt foreign on my tongue after so many years, but the moment I said it, the whispers stopped. The air grew heavy, almost suffocating, and the temperature in the room plummeted. And then, I saw him, standing in the corner, his figure faintly outlined in the dim glow of my phone. His military uniform was tattered, his face obscured by shadows, but I knew it was him, the protector, the friend I had unwittingly shunned. "Lovey," my voice cracked as I reached out toward him. "Is it really you?" He didn't move, but I felt his presence fill the room, warm and familiar yet tinged with something darker. His silence was deafening, and for the first time, I questioned whether calling him back had been a mistake. "I'm sorry," I choked out. Tears streamed down my face as I poured out my guilt. "I didn't understand. I didn't know it was you. Please forgive me." The shadow shifted slightly, and the room seemed to exhale. The oppressive weight lifted, replaced by a faint sense of peace. But as I lowered my phone, something in the corner glinted, something that hadn't been there before. A dog tag lay on the floor, its surface etched with a name I knew all too well, Lieutenant Ashley Gilchrist. I picked it up, clutching it tightly to my chest. His presence faded, leaving me alone in the room once more. For the first time in years, I slept peacefully, the dog tag still in my hand. But as I drifted off, a single thought lingered in my mind. If Ashley was truly gone, what had been whispering in the darkness before he came? The days that followed were a strange mix of peace and unease. I kept Ashley's dog tag with me at all times, a small token of his devotion that seemed to carry his lingering presence. I thought about him often, replaying moments from my childhood that now made sense in light of his letter. There was comfort in knowing he had been there, watching over me, even when I was too naive or scared to understand. But there was also the question that gnawed at me. The whispers, they weren't his. I was sure of that now. Something else had been in my room that night, and Ashley's reappearance had driven it away. Yet, without him, I wondered if it would return. The unease grew stronger when small things began to happen around the house. At first, it was subtle, a flickering light here, a misplaced item there. I convinced myself it was nothing. The house was old, prone to creaks and groans. But as the days turned into weeks, the occurrences became harder to ignore. One night, as I lay in bed scrolling mindlessly through my phone, the room suddenly grew cold. The kind of cold that made my breath visible in the dim light. I sat up, clutching the dog tag instinctively, and scanned the room. The shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally, pooling in the corners like liquid darkness. Lovey, I called out, my voice trembling. The name felt like a talisman, a shield against whatever was out there. But there was no response, no reassuring warmth or faint presence to signal his return. The shadows in the corners shifted. My heart raced as I stared, paralyzed. Something was there. It wasn't Ashley. It couldn't be. This presence was darker, heavier, and malevolent in a way that made my skin crawl. A faint, guttural whisper broke the silence, chilling me to my core. I couldn't make out the words, but the intent was clear. It wanted me to be afraid. My grip on the dog tag tightened as I forced myself to speak. "You don't belong here," I said, my voice shaking. "Leave." The whispering stopped. For a moment, the room was deathly silent, and I allowed myself a glimmer of hope. But then, the shadows surged forward, spilling across the floor like ink. I scrambled back against the headboard, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. "Lovey!" I screamed, desperation overtaking me. "Please help me." The dog tag in my hand grew warm, almost burning, and a sudden burst of light filled the room. The shadows recoiled, retreating to the corners with an otherworldly screech. And then he was there, standing between me and the darkness. Ashley's figure was more defined this time, his features clearer. His uniform was pristine, his stance commanding. He turned to face me, his expression stern but protective. "It's all right," he said, his voice calm and steady. "I'm here." Tears streamed down my face as relief washed over me. "What is it?" I whispered, barely able to speak. Ashley glanced toward the corner where the shadows writhed, contained but not defeated. "Something that shouldn't be here," he said grimly. "It's drawn to the void I left behind. Can you stop it?" I asked, clutching the dog tag so tightly it left marks on my palm. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer to the corner, his presence radiating a strength that seemed to push back against the encroaching darkness. The shadows hissed and recoiled further, but they didn't vanish. "I can hold it back," he said finally, turning back to me. "But not forever." Panic surged within me. "What do I do?" I asked, my voice breaking. "I can't face this alone." Ashley's gaze softened, and for the first time, he seemed uncertain. "You're stronger than you think," he said. "But there's something you need to understand. This thing, it feeds on fear. If you let it consume you, it will grow stronger." I nodded, though I wasn't sure how to control the terror that gripped me. "Will you stay?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "For as long as I can," he promised. But you need to be ready. There may come a time when I can't protect you. His words hung heavy in the air, a stark reminder of the fragile balance between safety and peril. I watched as he turned back to the corner, his form glowing faintly in the dim light. The shadows hissed again, retreating further, but I could feel their hunger, their determination. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in bed, clutching the dog tag and watching as Ashley stood guard, a silent sentinel against the encroaching darkness. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. The battle was far from over. The following days felt like walking a tightrope stretched over a bottomless void. Ashley's presence lingered, a faint, comforting warmth that I clung to like a lifeline. But the shadows in the corners of my home grew more restless, more insistent. They were patient predators, waiting for a crack in my resolve, a moment of vulnerability to exploit. I tried to go about my life as normally as I could. I went to work, saw friends, even managed to laugh at times. But every evening, when the sun dipped below the horizon, the unease returned. It was as though the darkness outside seeped into my house, bringing with it the whispers and shadows that had become my unwelcome companions. One night, as I sat in the living room trying to distract myself with a book, the lights flickered. I froze, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. The temperature dropped, and I felt the now familiar chill that signaled their presence. I clutched Ashley's dog tag, muttering his name under my breath. "Lovey, please," I whispered, desperation creeping into my voice. The room fell silent, the kind of silence that wasn't empty but pregnant with intent. The shadows began to gather in the far corner, swirling like smoke. This time, they didn't stay confined. They spilled out across the floor, creeping closer with each passing second. I backed away, the book slipping from my hands. The whispers began again, low and guttural, growing louder until they seemed to reverberate in my skull. My knees buckled, and I fell to the floor, clutching the dog tag like a talisman. "Ashley!" I screamed. Light burst from the tag, and with it came Ashley's presence. He materialized before me, his form more solid than it had ever been. He radiated strength and authority, his hand reaching out to shield me as he stepped between me and the encroaching darkness. The shadows hissed and recoiled, their movements frantic. The whispers turned into an unearthly wail, a sound so piercing it made me cover my ears. Ashley stood firm, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Enough," he commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. The shadows faltered, their form wavering, but they didn't retreat entirely. They seemed to gather themselves, as if preparing for one final push. Ashley turned to me, his expression grave. "I can't hold them forever," he said. "You need to do something." "What?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What can I do?" Ashley's gaze softened, and for a moment, I saw the man behind the soldier. "You have to confront them," he said. "They're drawn to your fear, your pain. You need to show them they have no power over you." "How?" My voice broke, tears streaming down my face. "I don't know how to do that." "You do," he said, kneeling beside me. "You've faced worse. You've survived things that would break most people. You have a strength inside you that they can't touch." The shadows surged forward again, their movements erratic. Ashley rose to meet them, his presence a glowing shield that kept them at bay. But I could see the strain it was putting on him. His form flickered, the light dimming slightly. "I can't do this without you," he said, his voice steady but tinged with urgency. "You have to stand with me." Something inside me snapped into place. I didn't know where the courage came from. Maybe it was the years of resilience I'd built, or maybe it was the unwavering belief Ashley had in me. Whatever it was, it propelled me to my feet. I faced the shadows, my heart racing but my resolve firm. "You don't belong here," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "You have no power over me." The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of rage and desperation. The shadows lunged toward me, but this time, I didn't back down. I gripped Ashley's dog tag tightly and stepped forward, my fear dissolving into something stronger defiance. "You can't hurt me," I said, the words spilling out like a mantra. "I'm not afraid of you." The shadows recoiled, their form unraveling. The whispers turned into a high-pitched wail before fading into nothingness. The room grew still, the oppressive weight lifting as the darkness dissolved. Ashley turned to me, a proud smile on his face. "You did it," he said, his form flickering but still solid. I nodded, my chest heaving as the adrenaline ebbed away. "I couldn't have done it without you." His smile faded slightly, and I saw a flicker of sadness in his eyes. "This is the end of my journey," he said softly. "You don't need me anymore." "No," I said, shaking my head. "I still need you. Please don't go." "You'll always carry me with you," he said, placing a hand over my heart. "But it's time for you to stand on your own. You're stronger than you realize." Before I could protest, his form began to fade, the light dimming until it was just me standing in the empty room. I held the dog tag to my chest, tears streaming down my face. For the first time in years, the house was quiet. No whispers, no shadows, just the comforting silence of peace. The days that followed were strangely serene, as if the house itself had exhaled after years of tension. The oppressive heaviness was gone, replaced by an unfamiliar lightness. The corners of the rooms, once cloaked in darkness, seemed ordinary now, just empty spaces where nothing lurked. I kept Ashley's dog tag close, wearing it beneath my clothes like a shield. It wasn't just a keepsake. It was a reminder of his love and sacrifice, a testament to the promise he had kept. The thought of him watching over me, even in his absence, brought me comfort. Life returned to a semblance of normalcy. I laughed with friends, focused on my work, and even started sleeping better. The nightmares that had plagued me for years vanished, leaving my nights undisturbed. Yet, there was an emptiness, a quiet ache that lingered. I missed him, not the specter that had frightened me as a child, but the guardian I had come to understand and love. One evening, I found myself drawn to the attic, a place I hadn't dared to explore in years. It was where we had stored my father's belongings after he died, and the space was a time capsule of a life I'd barely remembered. Dust motes danced in the air as I pulled open the creaky door and stepped inside. Among the boxes and old furniture, I found a trunk with my father's name etched into the wood. I knelt beside it, my hands trembling as I opened the lid. Inside were photographs, medals, and letters, fragments of a man I had never truly known. As I sifted through the contents, I found a photograph tucked into the corner. It was faded and creased, but the faces were unmistakable. My father and Ashley, standing side by side in their uniforms. They looked so young, so full of life. Ashley's grin was infectious, his arms slung casually around my father's shoulders. Tears blurred my vision as I traced their faces with my fingertips. This was the man who had devoted himself to my father, who had kept his promise long after death. In that moment, I felt an overwhelming surge of gratitude and love. Beneath the photograph was a small envelope. Inside was a single piece of paper, yellowed with age, bearing my father's handwriting. The words were simple but powerful. To Ashley, thank you for everything. If anything happens to me, take care of my family. I trust you with my life and theirs. Marcus. I clutched the letter to my chest, the weight of their bond settling over me. It wasn't just duty that had driven Ashley. It was love, pure and unwavering. That night, I sat by the window with the dog tag in my hand, gazing at the stars. Thank you, Ashley, I whispered, for everything. The wind stirred, carrying a faint warmth that brushed against my skin like a gentle embrace. It was fleeting but unmistakable, his way of saying goodbye. As the years went by, I carried Ashley's memory with me. His dog tag remained close, a symbol of strength and love that I drew upon whenever I felt lost. And though he was gone, I knew he would always be a part of me, watching from a place where shadows could never reach. The whispers never returned, and the corners of my home remained empty. But I no longer feared the darkness. I had faced it and won, with Ashley by my side. And in his absence, I found a light within myself that no shadow could ever extinguish.
Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to listen to similar stories in future.